Welcome on in, everybody. It's the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. It's episode 52 of season 2024. It's our round 24 preview coming up. We're going to check out all 9 matches coming up in what is a massive weekend of football for many teams. A final chance to make a move and lock in a good spot for finals football. Before we do that, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe as always, and don't forget to check out all the social medias. We've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we got it. 2 podcasts every week go live on Spotify and YouTube, so no matter where you watch, make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Moving right along into the games, massive weekend. We start with one that's not so much of a massive game. Who would have thought? It's Melbourne Collingwood, MCG, Friday night football. Even mid-season, who would have thought that both of these teams would not be in finals contention? We've got Melbourne sitting 12th at the moment, Collingwood 10th on the ladder. Technically, Collingwood can make finals, but they would need an absolute miracle, and I can't see that happening. We'll lead off with the teams for this game. For Melbourne, Bailey Laurie comes in for Tom Sparrow, and a milestone game for Trent Rivers. He's playing his 100th AFL match. For Collingwood, quite a few changes. Charlie Dean, Edward Allen, Finlay McRae and Joe Richards all coming in. Going out, Billy Frampton, Jack Bytel, Daniel McStay and Ned Long. So interesting to see a couple of those changes that are made. Guessing maybe trying out a couple of people, giving them one last shot maybe at proving themselves. We'll wait and see what they make of that. But big game for, not really a big game, but a chance to finish what is a disappointing season for both teams on a high. Pretty much the winner of this will finish above the other one. Collingwood win, they will go to 12, technically 13 wins, 12 wins and 2 draws. Whereas if Melbourne win this one, they'll go to 12 wins and jump above Collingwood and Essendon before Essendon play, of course. Looking at the matchup, I guess, what do we make of it? Collingwood did win the last meeting, which was in round 13, quite comfortably, 38 points. Big game, that one. A lot happened. Petrarca got injured, and obviously he hasn't been back this season since then. Nick Dacos got injured for Collingwood, but didn't miss any games. Collingwood won it. They have definitely had the more of the success since 2018, really. They've won 8 of the last 10. They've won 5 of the last 6 against Melbourne. So had a lot of success going the way of Collingwood. Looking at the numbers, obviously a lot better offense for Collingwood, but also better defense on side of Melbourne. They're just playing in a lot lower scoring matches this year than Collingwood. Completely opposite teams, really. Forward efficiency for Collingwood's high, defensive efficiency not so good. Whereas for Melbourne, forward efficiency is really quite average, and their defensive efficiency is the best in the game. So complete opposite in that side of things. Both teams struggle at getting control of the ground. Both get beaten inside 50s most weeks. Both teams pretty average at disposal efficiency. Neither team typically great at clearances. Collingwood slightly ahead of them in that regard. Contested football, Melbourne are good at. Collingwood are okay sometimes. Depends what week it is. Uncontested footy, both teams struggle. And then tackling, both teams pretty good at. Intercept game, both teams pretty much identical at in terms of that stat. Other areas or factors in this game, it's hard to say exactly where this game's going to be won or lost, because it's an offensive game plan versus a defensive game plan, I guess, in a lot of ways. Collingwood probably might actually win clearances, which doesn't happen all that often. they'll be looking to try and assert some dominance in that area, I guess, and control the ball and the ground. If Collingwood do well at inside 50 count, you'd think they're probably going to go all right because they do tend to attack very well, although Melbourne do defend well. So it will be interesting to see what prevails in the end. It's possibly going to go down to the last second. There's been many of Collingwood-Melbourne games that have gone down to the wire, even though Collingwood have had the more success in this matchup. You look at qualifying final last year, Collingwood by 7. Round 13 last year, it was Melbourne by 4. Round 21, 2022, it was Collingwood by 7. So the 3 matches in a row within 7 points. And then obviously that got broken earlier this year when Collingwood won by 38. But has been plenty of close games over the last couple of years between the two teams. How that plays out here, I guess we'll see, but quite possibly a scoreline of like 68 to 71, give or take, who knows. But potentially that's what it kind of looks like in a game that doesn't mean a whole lot other than, I guess, draft order and final ladder position. But that's Friday night footy. We jump onto Saturday afternoon football. It's Geelong West Coast at GMHBA. For Geelong, a few changes. Zach Tui, Jed Buse, Tanner Bruin all coming in. Zach Tui announced his retirement during the week, so he's going to play out the season before hanging up the boots. Going out is Austin Mullen, Mitch Nevitt and Gary Rowan. Zach Guthrie playing his 100th game. For the West Coast Eagles, lots of changes. Reet Bazzo, Clay Hall, Campbell Chesser, Ryan Marrick and Jack Hutchinson coming in. Going out is Alex Witherden, Jeremy McGovern, Andrew Gaff, Liam Ryan, and Zane True. What's this game mean in the season? Obviously, West Coast are locked in their position at 16th. They can't go up, they can't go down. You'd think that I guess a few of their young players will be playing for their position in their careers, but overall, it's probably going to be hard for them to be too motivated in this game. Meanwhile, Geelong are sitting 4th on the ladder. Depending on other results, they could get potentially up to 3rd. In a crazy world, they could get up to 2nd. They would have to win by a decent margin here against West Coast and need Port Adelaide and GWS to both lose. But they're going to get the opportunity to get a percentage boost, you'd think, playing against West Coast at GMHBA. You'd think. Not definite, but chances are they're going to get a crack at it. So a win guarantees them top 4 spot. If they lose, they could and likely will drop out of the top 4. So it's an important match for them. But you wouldn't think they would lose this one to West Coast. So maybe 3rd or 4th position for them, depending on some other results. Moving into the match, some stats for you from this one. Geelong have the much better success over West Coast, 7-3 in the last 10. They've won the last 4. Most of them quite comfortably. They met in round 5. Geelong won it by 47 points. They met twice last year. Geelong won by about 80 points and 20 points. And then they met in round 6 in 2021 and they won by 97 points. So quite a lot favouring Geelong over recent years. They won 6 out of 7. So most things point towards a Geelong win in this one. All the stats pretty much point the way of Geelong as well. They've got better offense, they've got better defense. Forward efficiency is a bit of a concern for Geelong this year, but they are better at that than West Coast typically. Defence is way better on Geelong's side, which isn't that surprising, being West Coast a low-ranked team that is very young and a lot of in and outs and whatnot, so not surprising. Field position likely dominated by Geelong. Clearances probably dominated by Geelong. Contested footy, uncontested footy. While Geelong aren't typically great at it, so it is a potential chance for West Coast to win that area this game. I still think they probably don't. The turnover game's where this game's going to be won, though, because West Coast aren't typically great at looking after the football when they have it, and Geelong are the best at getting the ball back and then not giving it away again. So that's probably what's going to factor. It doesn't matter too much for Geelong, I don't think, whether they're winning first use of the ball in clearance game, because they will likely be dominating that turnover game and end up using that to dominate the territory battle. I would imagine that's what's going to happen in this one. It's hard to see a world where the Eagles can cause an upset. On at 2:10 at the MCG, it's Richmond Gold Coast in a game that means nothing. Just like the Friday night game, both teams not playing finals football. Richmond sitting 18th on the ladder, Gold Coast sitting 14th on the ladder. Is a chance for the Tigers to get off the bottom of the ladder with a win here. If they win and get a little bit of a percentage booster, maybe, and North Melbourne lose to Hawthorn, Richmond could jump up to 17th. Do they want to do that? Or do they want number one pick? I don't know. But for a team that hasn't won a wooden spoon in a long time, they'll be maybe wanting to get off the bottom of the ladder. Meanwhile, Gold Coast, their season's got away from them a little bit. They've only won one of their last 5. They're sitting 14th on the ladder. They're, 3 games out of the 8 at the moment. If they lose this one, they're likely going to be 4 games out of the 8. And for a season that showed a bit of promise, they'll be pretty disappointed with that, I would imagine. All the numbers, though, do point towards a Gold Coast win, except for the fact that they do struggle to travel. Teams have been announced. We've got for Richmond, Maurice Rioli, Liam Baker and Marloine Pickett coming in. Going out, Jacob Blight, James Tressy and Matthew Coulthard. Hugo Ralphsmith playing his 50th game. That's come around very quickly. Gold Coast, they have 2 changes. Alex Sexton and Jack Lukosius coming in. Going out, David Swallow and Jed Walter. Looking at some of the numbers in this one, Gold Coast have had some success recently over Richmond. They've won the last 4. They met in opening round this year and they kind of dominated the game. They won by 39 points. It could have been a lot more, but for a little bit of a mini comeback, Richmond did in the third quarter. They met once last year, Gold Coast won that. They met once in 2022, and Gold Coast won it by 2 points, and they met once in 2021, and Gold Coast won that by 10 points. Before that, Richmond had dominated the matchup, winning at least the previous 6 matchups. Overall, 7-7 record between the 2 teams, and Gold Coast do have the history over the last 3 years, which suggests probably Gold Coast win. We're always a little bit hesitant when they travel. They did obviously win their last away game, which was against the Bombers at Marvel. So you'd think that'd be enough to now put them into favouritism in this game and should win. But as we say, it's a game that doesn't mean a lot from either team, really. Could get Richmond off the bottom. Gold Coast, it could move them up a couple spots, I think. Where are they sitting? Hypothetically, they could get a couple spots if Melbourne lose by a little bit and they win by a little bit. Or if they lose, they can't drop any further than 14th. So I don't know if a whole heap is riding on this game, but you'd think Gold Coast will want to win it. And potentially Richmond, don't know what they're going to be thinking. But I guess we'll find out on Saturday afternoon. Yeah, all the numbers point towards Gold Coast pretty much across the board, as you can see. Richmond are rated pretty much 18th, 17th or 16th in almost every category. The 15th in forward efficiency, which still isn't great, but it is ahead of Gold Coast forward efficiency, who are ranked 17. The 12th in stoppage clearances, which is also ahead of Gold Coast, who are 14th in stoppage clearances. But everything else is ranked last, second last, or third last in the competition. So I don't have huge hope for Richmond here, but neither team you're not gonna know what either team is going to be bringing to the table on Saturday afternoon. We move into the next game, which is an important one for one of the two teams. It's Hawthorn North Melbourne at Utah Stadium in Launceston. Teams have been announced, and Hawthorn have one change. Finn McGuinness coming in for Will Day, which is a big change. Lloyd Meek playing his 50th game. He's had a great season. North Melbourne have 3 changes. Will Phillips, Toby Pink and Blake Drury coming in. Going out are Charlie Coburn, Miller Bergman and Eddie Ford. As we say, it's a big game for Hawthorn. A win guarantees them finals. A loss could see them dropping out of the 8, depending on the Carlton result and also the Fremantle result. If both Carlton and Fremantle win, Hawthorn lose, they will be missing finals football, which would be a crazy disappointment for them after certainly the back half of the year. They lost their first 5, and since then they've gone 8-4 and looked really, really good lately. It's hard to see them losing this game against North Melbourne, so I wouldn't be expecting them to miss finals, but you never know what will happen. This season probably still has a twist or a turn somewhere along the line, but who knows. North Melbourne, as we just kind of mentioned, they can't go above 17th, but they could drop to 18th if they lose this one and West Coast win. Not West Coast, sorry, Richmond win. They'll know before they start whether they're a chance to drop or not, based on Richmond's game will finish pretty much as this one starts. So they'll be knowing whether they're playing for Wooden Spoon or not, just as they're starting. You'd imagine they probably won't be, but either way, it's hard to see them getting over Hawthorn. They're just playing so well lately. They're 3-0 at Utah Stadium this year as well, Hawthorn, so they've got that going in their favour. These two teams did meet earlier this year, which was back in round 6, which was Hawthorn's first win of the season, and Hawthorn smoked them. They won it by 45 points. Never really looked in doubt. Hawthorn have won the last 5 between these two teams. They've won 7 of the last 10. So they do have a better record than North Melbourne in this matchup. All the numbers point towards Hawthorn, who are attacking better, defending better. Still a bit of work in the forward efficiency game and the defensive efficiency game for Hawthorn, but they're really starting to dominate the territory battle. Plus 5.8 inside 50s a game, which is crazy from where they were in that first 2 months of the season. Clearances, they're pretty good at. North Melbourne are not bad at either, to be completely honest with you, but Hawthorn's numbers have been looking good, especially against some good clearance teams. They did really well in that facet against Fremantle, who were the number 1 clearance team. Contested football is really good for Hawthorn. That is definitely not meant to be ranked 6 for North Melbourne. They should be ranked, I think it might be meaning to be a 16. They're certainly not good at contested football. Uncontested football goes the way of Hawthorn. Tackling, both teams kind of struggle in that area, but it hasn't hurt Hawthorn at all. Intercept game, Hawthorn is very, very good at. So we'll see how this plays out, but you'd imagine Hawthorn should go in as heavy favourites, and they should get this win, which will seal them a top 8 spot. Where will it put them on the ladder? I don't know. Depending on other results, it could be anywhere from probably 5 through 7 if they win. But it could also end up being that they pass Geelong if Geelong lost, but I don't see Geelong losing. So you'd think definitely Geelong Brisbane win, so maybe they can jump up to 6th if the Doggies lose to GWS, which would give them an MCG final, although even if Bulldogs finish 6th, it'll be Hawthorn Bulldogs at the MCG, which also would be big. Yeah, so they win. They're probably going to be playing in Melbourne in the first week of finals. Likely to, at least, depending on other results, of course. Game. We move on to Saturday night football. First one is the Gabba for Brisbane Essendon. One of these teams playing finals, one will not be. Obviously, Brisbane sitting fifth on the ladder. They have lost their last 2 weeks. They'll be wanting to get a win to go into finals with confidence. Technically, haven't qualified for finals just yet, but you'd think they have. They would have to lose by about 100 points, and Fremantle would have to win by 100, as well as Bulldogs, Hawthorn and Carlton all winning for them to miss finals. So you'd say they're pretty much locked into the top 8. Is that going to be fourth? Is their best result if Geelong were to lose, but you can't see Geelong losing, so you'd say in all likelihood fifth if they win. If they lose, they'll probably finish 7 or 8, depending on whether the Bulldogs and Carlton win, basically. I don't know what else to say about that bit. Essendon, they're going to finish somewhere between 10th and 12th. Not a lot to play for. It's a tough game for them at the best of times, and that's pretty much the long and short of it for the Dons. Teams for this game: Brisbane have Connor McKenna and Noah Answorth coming in. Going out, Brandon Starkovich and Shadow Brain. Joey Danaher playing game number 200. He was up and down last week. He was really good at times, made a couple little blues. Meanwhile, for the Dons, Dyson Heppel coming in for his final game. They didn't want to give him a send-off game in Victoria, but they have him at the Gabba, so that's an interesting choice from the Dons. But he'll be playing his final game. Matt Guelphy also coming in. Out goes Sam Wiedemann, who came in for one game this season last week and then straight back out. And Jai Menzie is also out of the team for this week. Looking at this matchup, history says it's pretty close. Brisbane have probably had the wood over them since 2020. They've won 4 of the last 5. Before that, Essendon had a bit of success, winning 3 of the 4 before that. Last matchup was round 9 last year. The Lions won it by 42 points. You look down the stats, most areas, Brisbane are the better team than Essendon. Both teams dominate field position, so that will be interesting to see how that plays out on Saturday night, being 2 teams that really emphasise high inside 50 counts. The difference being that Brisbane are really good forward efficiency-wise, meanwhile Essendon are not. Brisbane ranks 6th in that area, Essendon 16th. It's been probably Essendon's biggest issue this year is the fact that both forward and defensive efficiency, their ability to score, get shots on goal from their forward flurries is not great. There's a lot of reasons for that. Their forward line doesn't work that great from what I can tell, and also their entries are not great as well. They do tend to bomb them long, and just hit and hope sometimes going inside 50. They make some interesting decisions also when they've got people out and go to the wrong person and whatnot. So there's plenty of factors for them to work on in the off-season, but it's hard to see them going up to the Gabba and causing an upset here in a game that doesn't mean much for the Dons, but certainly means a lot for Brisbane because they will be wanting a home final. They win, they pretty much finish 5th, and they will at least get a home elimination final in week 1 against what is likely a Victorian team or, at worst, Fremantle. So, yeah, it's going to be a game where you'd expect Brisbane to get the job done, but there's been plenty of weird things that have happened this season, so I guess we can't really rule out a Bombers win. I reckon the Bombers fans will be pretty disappointed if they do manage to get over the line, though, because their season's already over, and this would not be the time for them to go and finally beat a team that they shouldn't. Yeah, it's hard to see well, though. Clearances are both pretty good for both teams. Tackles, Bombers are... That's the one area Bombers are much better than Brisbane at. Third-ranked team compared to the 18th. Both teams pretty good at the turnover game. It's going to be a fascinating duel if both teams bring their best. But whether we'll see the best from the Bombers on Saturday night, I'm not entirely sure. The next Saturday night match, Sydney-Adelaide at the SCG. Once again, a finals contender versus a non-finals contender. It's a game that probably means the least amount of anything of any match this weekend, just about, because neither team really can move unless Adelaide were to win by 100 points and Port Adelaide were to later on in the weekend win by 100 points. Neither team can really move. Sydney, they're a game and 8% ahead of Port Adelaide. Adelaide can't move, win, lose or draw. Sydney, will they be playing to keep themselves healthy and fit? I don't know. Adelaide will have nothing to lose. Sydney have the possibility of injuries and suspensions to think about. Whether that will affect this match or not, who knows? I guess we'll see on Saturday night. But it is the game for sure that means the least this weekend. Teams have been announced for this one. Aaron Francis and Chad Warner coming back in. Outgoing Tom McCartan and Corey Warner. Joel Amati is playing his 50th game. He's an interesting player, that one. I didn't realise he was only at 50, so he's only still fresh into the game. I'd like to see a little bit more from him, especially over the last month or so. But he's just, as I said, a young player that's only played 50 games, so you can't expect too much of them. For Adelaide, 4 changes. James Borley, Chase Jones, Taylor Walker and Billy Dowling all coming in. Outgoing Mark Keane, Isaac Rankin, Lachlan Golland and Josh Rochelle. So some big changes for Adelaide. They're making a statement with Josh Rochelle. Obviously, Rankin's out with concussion from last week. But yeah, looking at the numbers in this one and the matchup, Sydney 7-3 over the last 10, including winning the last 5. They met at Adelaide Oval not last year. Well, they might have, but this year is what I was talking about. Sydney won it in the end comfortably by 42 points. It was pretty close up until the third quarter. I think Sydney banged on about 10 in a row pretty quickly in the second half just to blow Adelaide away, which is what they were doing at that time of the year. It's certainly a different Sydney at the moment, although they've won 2 in a row. Maybe their confidence is coming back. I would think that they'll want to go in and win this because they need to really assert that confidence back inside of them because they have kind of struggled of late. But we'll see, I guess. Looking at the numbers for this game, it's hard to see a world where Sydney don't dominate it, but then again, they lost to Port Adelaide by 117 points only like a month ago, so who knows really what's going to happen in this game. But most categories go the way of Sydney. The only areas really where Adelaide are better at is accuracy in front of goal, disposal efficiency, and uncontested football. That's about it. Intercept game, I guess both teams are both pretty average at. It's not the way Sydney play. They don't dominate the intercept game. They just... It's a weird style that Sydney have kind of played most of this season. I don't think it's that dissimilar to what we saw from Collingwood last year in terms of they don't dominate a full game of football and that's why they won. They tend to stick around. They don't let the opposition get away from them by more than a few goals at most, and then they turn it on and dominate a passage of play. They'll dominate whether it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes. They'll kick 10 goals in that time to 1 or 2 at most, and then that's game over. They've done it probably 8-10 times this year where you can really pinpoint that exact same thing. And you go back to last year, Collingwood did that many times, and maybe that's the Sydney strategy this year. Whether it's by design or just by what's happened, I don't know, but it has kind of been a continual thing, I guess, for Sydney this year. Move on to Sunday football, and 3 games that all will have a bearing on the finals action. First up, Bulldogs GWS, Ballarat Mars Stadium, Sunday afternoon football. We don't have, well, we have the teams announced, but obviously we've extended benches, so there will be some changes from this. But coming in for the Bulldogs, Tim English, Riley Garcia, Arthur Jones, Caleb Poulter. Going out is Riley West. Bailey Williams playing his 150th game for the GWS Giants. Cullen Brown, Xavier O'Halloran, Harvey Thomas and Nick Haynes all coming in. Going out is Lockie Ash. What does this game mean? It means a lot. GWS are in some fine form, sitting third on the ladder. A win would guarantee them a top 3 finish, either second or third. A loss could potentially drop them down to 4th, depending on percent and whether Geelong win or not. Where would they rather finish? If they were to finish in third, they'll likely be playing Port Adelaide in Adelaide for week 1, which would be a tough one, but you never know. If they were to drop down to 4th, though, would have a Sydney derby as a qualifying final, which would be absolutely massive. So a couple potential really good matchups there. However, if they were to win and Port Adelaide were to lose, they would jump up to 2nd spot and they would be hosting a qualifying final against Port Adelaide in all likelihood. So they won't know what Port Adelaide has done until well after their game. Obviously, the GWS game is the first game of the afternoon, which is at like 12:30. I think the Port Adelaide game starts at like 6 hours later, so they won't know for a while exactly where they're going to finish. But if they win, they're going to finish 3rd at worst, or potentially 2nd, depending on what Port Adelaide do. And also percentage could come into play there, but I doubt it. I reckon there's just enough of a gap that it's unlikely to affect it. Meanwhile, the Doggies, they've got everything to play for as well, because if they lose, Hawthorn, Carlton and Fremantle all win, they will be missing finals, which would be absurd for how good I guess they've been in the second half of this season. They are the team with the 2nd best percentage in the competition, and you never know, could end up as the team with the best percentage. It'll be close. The fact that they could still miss finals is crazy. If they were to win and Brisbane lose, they will be 5th on the ladder. If they win and Brisbane win, they'll be 6th on the ladder. If they lose, they could finish anywhere from 6 to 9. So a lot riding on this game. They'll obviously be wanting to finish 5th or 6th, which would entail a win here, and then they'd be hosting any one of Brisbane, Hawthorn, Carlton or Fremantle in Melbourne. Which one of those they would rather, I'm not sure. They probably won't really want to play Hawthorn or Carlton at the MCG, but that is likely what is going to happen, that they're going to be playing one of those two. So I don't know. It's going to be a lot of permutations for them, really. Those 5th through 8th spot could change multiple times this weekend. But if Brisbane have already won this weekend, which they obviously play Saturday night, then the best the Bulldogs can hope for is 6th. And we'll see what happens, I guess, from there. But this game has a lot riding on it. It's basically the crux the crunch of it. We've got GWS playing for a home double chance, a top 2 spot, potentially, or at worst third. And Bulldogs, on the other hand, who have the home game here in Ballarat, playing for a home final as well, but also playing for a final spot, because it is potential that they drop out of the 8, which would be an absurd thing with as high a percentage as they have. If they were to lose this by a point and miss finals with a percentage of about 122, that would be insanity. Looking at this matchup, Bulldogs have the better of them, certainly over the last few years. 7-3 in the last 10, including 6 out of the last 7. Suggests a Bulldogs victory here. And that one loss that they've had in the last few years was late last year by 5 points to a team that ended up going on and almost making a grand final, whereas the Bulldogs didn't even play finals last year. So not that surprising that result went against them there. You'd have to say this is probably GWS's biggest rival in terms of on-field what's happened between them and other teams over the history. Bulldogs lead the overall record 12-7. Up until the last 10, though, it was 5-4, so it was close. Bulldogs kind of pulling away now. They did win earlier this year, the Bulldogs in Sydney, when they kicked 8 goals, 22, and still won the game. I think the Doggies win this, but GWS's form has been really good in terms of, I don't think they've been beating teams. Obviously, they beat them on the scoreboard, but I don't think they've been playing better football. I don't think they're dominating anybody, but they just do enough to win games of football in the end, and that's all you have to do. I don't know if I'm completely wrong here. I could be. I don't think GWS are a top 8 team. I think if you look at their first 6 weeks, they certainly were one of the best teams in the competition. Top 3. They then had that whole middle period of the season where I don't think they were even top 12 teams, and then over the last 8 weeks where they've been winning a lot of games, they've won their last 6 or so. They're in great form, but I still don't think they're even anywhere near the top 4 teams. I'd put them in that 5 to 10 bracket. But they've been winning games of football, and that's all you have to do in the grand scheme of it. I don't think it's a team that's going to win the premiership based on what I've seen, but you never know. We'll see. A win here would be huge for them. A loss isn't the end of the world because, as I said, they're going to be top 4. And you never know. A loss could put them in the firing line of playing against Geelong. Oh, not Geelong, sorry. Sydney in Sydney, which would be a cracking game for a first week of the finals. Otherwise, with both Sydney teams in the top 4, potential that we could have an all-Sydney prelim final as well, which would be insane as well. So we'll see what happens, but I've gone on a bit of a rant about how I don't think GWS are that good. I'm still of that belief. They could prove me wrong by beating Bulldogs and actually beating them, but in the end, all you got to do is win games of football, and that's what they've been doing. So we'll see how that one plays out on Sunday afternoon. The next game on Sunday afternoon is another big game for one team. Not a huge amount riding on it for St Kilda, although their late season resurgence has been good, but also maybe bad because they've gained a couple of positions on the ladder. We'll get into that in a minute. We'll look at the teams. Obviously, just like the previous game, extended bench, so we don't know exactly who's playing and who's not yet. But we've got Adam Sard, Charlie Curnow and Orazio Fantasia coming in for Carlton. No outs as yet. For St Kilda, Philippou, Jack Hayes, Tom Campbell and Angus McLennan coming in. Out going Anthony Caminti. That's that. The ladder positions, Carlton go into this sitting 8th on the ladder. A win would guarantee finals. A loss might see them out of the finals race. Meanwhile, St Kilda are sitting 13th on the ladder. They've managed to get above both Adelaide and Gold Coast in recent weeks. The best they can get to is ahead of Melbourne if Melbourne lose and St Kilda win by enough. So they could technically go up to 12th. A loss could see them drop down below Gold Coast, depending on how Gold Coast go against Richmond on Saturday. So not much in terms of meaning for St Kilda in the grand scheme of things, but they've had a really good second half of the season, and maybe they can use that to build into next year and get rid of the disappointment of how bad they started this year. Really wasn't the first few weeks that they lost it. It was that period from about round 3 through to round 12-ish that they just lost too many games that to end up being a team that challenges for finals. Meanwhile, Carlton, they've got it all to play for. Depending on results above them, they could technically come fourth, but they're not going to, because let's be honest, Geelong are going to win against West Coast. And if they don't, then you'd think Bulldogs, Brisbane or Hawthorn, one of them three will win. There's a chance that they could finish realistically 5th through 9. A loss, they will be, if they lose this one against St Kilda, they will be sweating on the final game of the round as to whether they're going to be playing finals. It would be absurd if they did lose this game and then they were still in the 8 up until the last game of the season and dropped out, kind of like they did a couple years ago when they lost to Collingwood. But they should just go out and win this one. It's at Marvel Stadium though, so St Kilda have been playing overall pretty well at Marvel. They've had a couple bad games off and on there, but they've won 4 of their last 5. They're in some really good form. This is not going to be an easy game for Carlton. The one thing they've got is St Kilda don't have a lot to play for, so maybe they won't get the best of St Kilda. But I really hope that St Kilda bring a fight and at least make Carlton work for it. In all honesty, Carlton have a team that's good enough to compete in finals. If they make it, they're going to be dangerous. Finishing 8th would not be probably their preferred spot to finish, because that would likely mean a Brisbane first week of finals, which would be a challenge. I reckon they would quite like the prospect of playing Bulldogs in week 1 of the finals. However, they probably also wouldn't really like to play Hawthorn in the first week of finals, because Hawthorn are going a lot better than the Blue Baggers are at the moment. So it will be interesting to see how this game finishes and where it ends up for Carlton. Looking at this matchup, St Kilda surprisingly have the better record over recent years. They're 7-3 over the last 10, which goes all the way back to 2016. They haven't met this year yet. The last time they met was round 21 last year. Carlton won it by 19 points. They also met in round 6 last year. St Kilda won it by 22. In 2022, they met once. St Kilda won it by 15. And then before that, Carlton won. Then St Kilda won. Then Carlton won. So a little bit of hit one, then the other, one, then the other. But overall, St Kilda have the 7-3 in the last 10. So not one of the worst matchups for St Kilda here. It's at Marvel. I think St Kilda play Marvel Stadium better than Carlton do. At least that's my opinion. I could be completely wrong. It's going to be interesting. I think both teams are pretty good at contested football. Carlton were the number 1 ranked team in that area not that long ago. They've kind of dropped off recently with their form, I guess. But St Kilda are showing that they are a very good contested football team. So I think this game could be very crucial in this game. because when teams take it up and beat Carlton in the contested football, they tend to lose the match. So they're going to have a lot riding on this, and if St Kilda bring the heat, it could be tough for Carlton. Clearance-wise, you'd think Carlton are going to win that area. Field position, neither team really do great at winning the inside 50 count and dominating that territory battle, but Carlton are really good at getting shots when they do go forward, whereas that's probably St Kilda's strength and weakness. Their weakness up forward, getting those, but they're really good at stopping other teams. So they're the third best defensive efficiency, going up against Carlton, who are the number one forward efficiency. So how that matches up, it's kind of like the Collingwood-Melbourne matchup. It will be interesting to see how that plays out on Sunday afternoon. You'd think Carlton would be expecting to go in and win this one, but at the same time, they can't even be 1% off. Any slight hiccups here, and St Kilda will make the pay, because St Kilda have played some really good football of late. St Kilda win this one, it could knock Carlton out of the finals, depending what happens in our final game of the year, which we are going to look at now. And it's Fremantle Port Adelaide over at Optus Stadium on Sunday evening, really. 6:10 p.m. kickoff for Australian Eastern Standard Times, which is, 4:10 WA time. Teams, as they've been announced, obviously extended benches, but Michael Walters, Neil Erasmus and James Aish coming in for Fremantle, no outs as yet. For Port Adelaide, Georgiadis, Vicentini, Josh Sin, Jed McEntee and Ollie Lord coming in. Going out, Dan Houston suspended for 5 weeks, which is a season over for Dan Houston unless he wins at the tribunal, which I don't know if that's tonight or must be tonight, I reckon. Probably at time of filming. By the time this video goes out, it's probably already been decided. And Quinton Narkle also going out. Ollie White's playing 250th game. He's been a great long-term player for Port Adelaide. Looking at what this game means, we'll start with Port Adelaide, the away team. They're in some cracking form. They're sitting second on the ladder. They're probably just about the best form team in the competition right now. Maybe with GWS. They have a chance. They win this. Technically, they could finish top of the ladder, but they're not going to. They win, they pretty much seal second spot and a home qualifying final and a home either second or third week final as well, which would likely be against GWS. Or Geelong if GWS happen to lose to the Bulldogs, which is entirely possible. Which one of those they would prefer, I'm not entirely sure. They'd probably rather play GWS in week 1. However, GWS did knock them out of the finals last year in Adelaide, so maybe that's not what they want at all. A lot riding on it for them though. Home final, week 1 of the finals would be huge for Port Adelaide. It's been well publicised, I guess, that they have kind of been a good home and away team for many years, and just kind of failed to put it together when it comes to September. They will be wanting, like nothing else, to prove that wrong, and the best chance to do that is to finish top 2 and have that home final first week. In the other side of this matchup is Fremantle, who are sitting 9th on the ladder. They've lost their last 3 games to go from a spot where they were looking like being top 4 only a month ago, to all of a sudden, even a win doesn't guarantee them finals, which is insane. They will know going into the game whether they can make finals or not. If everybody above them on the ladder, I know that's not technically possible because GWS and the Bulldogs play each other, but if everyone from 5th and above, win, then they will know they can't play finals, no matter what the result of this game is. However, if any of, mainly the Bulldogs, Hawthorn or Carlton slip up, they will still have a chance. The likely ones to lose the most likely ones of those to lose is Bulldogs and Carlton. If either of those lose, I can't see Hawthorn losing. So they'll be relying on GWS or St Kilda to get the win, and then they will be then relying on themselves to go and beat Port Adelaide to sneak into the 8th spot, really. Who saw this coming, though, for them? 3 losses in a row. All they needed to do was win one of them, and their finals chances would be in their own hands. They have absolutely stumbled, though, at the final hurdle, basically. And it's crazy because their numbers are still really good. They're by far the best clearance team in the game, even though they haven't been great at clearances lately. It'll be interesting to see how that matches up here against Port Adelaide, who are one of the better clearance teams as well. They're third best at clearances, second at sending clearances, and fourth at stoppage clearances. So that will be interesting. Uncontested football, both teams really like that uncontested game. However, Fremantle also bring a really good contested football game as well, whereas Port Adelaide don't so much. Both teams' forward efficiency, defensive efficiency, really good. Both pretty good at scoring. Both pretty good at defending. Across the board, it's going to be a fascinating match, and one that I personally would like to see both teams playing finals. It's hard to see it happening if favourites win, but let's be honest, there's always twists and turns in a football season, especially this year. So there's every chance that Fremantle will be playing for their lives on Sunday night. And at home, you'd have to give them a chance. Port Adelaide will also go into this knowing what they have to do, because if GWS have already GWS have already played, but if GWS lose on Sunday afternoon, and Geelong don't win by 200 points, they will know that even a loss will keep them in second, which is probably a good spot to be. But we'll see what happens. It should be a cracker. I'm not entirely sure what will happen, but who knows? It's going to be an eventful weekend, I think. The matchup recent years goes the way of Port Adelaide. They won 7 of the last 10. They played earlier this year, which was in Adelaide, and Port Adelaide just snuck over the line by 3 points. They won the round 23 matchup last year by 16 points. You go back to 2022 round 16 for Fremantle's last win over Port Adelaide. That was by 8 points. So they do have quite a few close contests. It's going to be tough one for Fremantle to make finals here. But if there's a chance going into this game, you can bet your bottom dollar they'll give it their best. They've got so many good players that you can't write them off. So we'll see what happens. But it will be a fascinating finish to the season. We will now have a quick look at my tips for this weekend. As you can see, so far this year, I'm 125 of 198. Yeah, that's pretty much not a great season, to be honest. Could be worse, but it's not fantastic. So Friday night, we've gone Collingwood by 7. I'm not confident in that at all. Both teams don't have a huge amount to play for, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that Collingwood won't come out and play really well and win the game. Geelong to beat West Coast comfortably. I've got them by 60 points. It could well be 200 points. I doubt it, but I don't think we're going to see much from West Coast this weekend. Gold Coast by 5. Not confident either way with that game. Hawthorn should beat North Melbourne comfortably. I've got them by 50. It wouldn't surprise me to see them win by 100. Brisbane by 20 over the Dons. They should be too good up there. Sydney by 45 over Adelaide. However, as I said before, I don't know if Sydney have a lot to play for, so we might not see the best from them. Bulldogs by 15 over Giants. Carlton to sneak over the line by 5 points on the Saints. And final game, Fremantle to win by 17 on Port Adelaide. However, if the previous results have all happened, that might not be the case. chuck these results into the ladder predictor, and the final ladder, based on my tips, would be Sydney top, obviously, 2 games clear of Port Adelaide second, Geelong sneaking into third, GWS fourth, Brisbane fifth, Bulldogs 6, Hawthorn 7, Carlton 8, Fremantle 9, Collingwood 10, Essendon 11, Melbourne 12, Gold Coast 13, St Kilda 14, Adelaide 15, West Coast 16, North Melbourne 17, and Richmond 18, which would have us having a really interesting first week of finals. It'd be Sydney GWS in a qualifying final, Brisbane hosting Carlton in an elimination final, Bulldogs Hawthorn at the MCG in an elimination final, and then final game would be Port Adelaide Geelong in a qualifying final, which would be some fascinating matches for week 1 of the finals. Obviously, a lot can change that. All you need is, say, St Kilda to sneak up over Carlton, and all of a sudden you got Fremantle in 8th spot. Or if, for example, GWS beat Bulldogs, then all of a sudden Carlton is 7th and playing Hawthorn, and Fremantle are up at the Gabba playing Brisbane. So there's a lot that can affect this weekend. There's going to be all the games that are kind of close in the markets are the ones that are going to have the most effect on this game, outside of the Collingwood Melbourne, most effect on the ladder, sorry. Outside of the Collingwood Melbourne, all the other games that are kind of close in the markets are the ones that are going to be the most interesting, which is the 3 Sunday games. GWS Bulldogs, who knows? Both teams have a very good chance in that one. Bulldogs go quite big favourites into it, not massive favourites. Carlton, St Kilda, either one could win that. Carlton go in slight favourites in that, and then Fremantle, Port Adelaide, Fremantle go in as slight favourites in that. So the 3 games to really watch for finals are the 3 Sunday games. While there are plenty of games on the Saturday that will have an effect, being the Geelong West Coast, Hawthorn, North Melbourne, Brisbane, Essendon, and even not really, but technically the Sydney Adelaide one, as we said, doesn't really have much effect because both teams should be finishing pretty much where they are at the moment. That's a wrap on season 2024 home and away season. We'll be back on Monday with a preview episode. No, not a preview, a review episode of round 24. We'll be looking at all 9 matches from the weekend. We're having a look at who's made finals, who missed out on finals, and I'll be giving you a bit of an update on what you're going to see from All Aussie Rules throughout September, because we've got a big September coming. It's finals football. There's going to be plenty of content coming out. We will continue the podcast all the way through till post AFL Grand Final Day. We might also start chucking in some AFLW content as well. That kicks off next weekend, so you might see some of that coming up as well. But until then, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. I appreciate you. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you comment on the video down below, /audio, whichever way you do it. And also subscribe. Always subscribe. Across the board, all of them. Thank you and good night.